Your top story at 9. Former President Jacob Zuma will know today whether he will have to personally pay for the costs related to his fraud and corruption, money laundering and racketeering case or not. Well, the High Court in Pretoria will hand down judgment on the DA and EFF's application to set aside an earlier agreement authorising state funding for Zuma's defence in criminal cases. The two opposition parties have asked the court to order the state attorney to determine how much money was paid for his defence and then to recover it from the former president. Last month, the High Court in Pretoria dismissed Zuma's bid to appeal a cost order made against him in his personal capacity when he approached the court to review the state of capture report by former public protector Thuli Modonsela. It is estimated that the state has so far paid between 15 and 32 million rand for his legal costs. Okay, let's get more on this story now. Our reporter Sipho Stearman is at court and let's go live to him. Hey Sipho, thank you very much indeed for your time. Now this could very well be a benchmark ruling. If the ruling goes against Mr. Zuma, what will this mean for government officials accused of crime committed whilst on the job?
Well, a very good morning to you and our viewers at home. Indeed, this could be a landmark ruling because not only did the DA and EFF approach the court to review and possibly set aside that 2006 agreement in which the presidency under President Thabo Mbeki agreed to pay President Zuma's legal fees, but they've also asked the court to determine whether the state should pay legal fees for government officials that are implicated or that are facing legal challenges over cases of corruption and fraud. So if the court rules on that, and certainly it goes against President Zuma and goes the way of the opposition parties, then it will charter, a new course in terms of court challenges that we often see government officials are engaging in years-long litigation processes, knowing that the state is going to cover those costs. So the two parties that came in, they said enough is enough with that approach. Of course, we saw with President Zuma that throughout his presidency, he delayed this spy tapes matter. It took over 10 years until right now, of course, those charges were reinstated by the NPA earlier this year in March, but he had frustrated opposition parties, the DAs, particularly when they were trying to get a hold of those spy tapes, and it has cost a lot of money. President Ramaphosa in parliamentary questions said it was around 15 million, but the EFF has said here that it could be actually around 30 million. So also we need to get a clear picture as to exactly what amount of money we are talking here, Blaine.
Yeah, there's been a number of calculations done, but I'm sure in future we'll hear exactly the certain amount. But do we know what this means for the former president himself, Sipho, if the ruling goes against him?
Well, if the former President Zuma's record with this High Court is anything to go by, it's not looking good. You mentioned there in your intro that the state of capture review application he had appealed to this court so that he does not have to pay the cost, but that was dismissed. So when he tried to interdict the release of former public protector Thuli Modonsela's state of capture report, which was unsuccessful, of course, that bid, then he was ordered to pay the cost for that personally. He tried to come here to try and appeal that, but that failed. So certainly his record in terms of cost orders when it comes to the Pretoria High Court, it's not a good one. But what this means then is that going forward, he will have to fork out his legal challenges bill himself. And of course, we know that he currently faces those 16 charges back in KZN, so his case is still ongoing. But the EFF has also not only asked that the agreement be declared invalid or be reviewed, but they've also asked that he actually pays back the money that has been paid thus far. So there's a lot of elements that could come in here, and depending on how it goes, we don't want to speculate yet, but it could certainly hurt the president financially. But of course, we know that the president receives a lifelong salary, so the DA argued in court that, well, he can afford to actually pay his own legal fees, and they've said that because these charges, he faces them in his personal capacity, not when he was the president or when he was executing his duties, that why should the state pay for those charges? That was the argument. But then Zuma's lawyers argued that, well, this agreement has been in place for quite some time. Why are they only coming now? And that they said that also there is no evidence that this agreement is is that of a corrupt nature, or that there is anything irregular about it. So those were the arguments that were put by the Zuma camp. Of course, the full bench will now have to decide on whether the president pays himself, and whether he has to pay back what has already been paid, and whether, of course, going forward, now government officials will have to fork the bill for themselves if they are implicated in cases of corruption and fraud in their personal capacity. Of course, if you are being challenged over a decision you've taken, perhaps as a minister, that's a different case. But then if you are implicated in cases of fraud in your personal capacity, why use state funds for that? So we are going to get a bit of clarity from this court today.
You know, Sipo, I know you touched on this earlier on, but I just want to get more clarity with regards to this current agreement between the presidency and Mr. Zuma in terms of his legal fees. What do we know? Is there a clause in this agreement that says that he will pay back the money if he is indeed convicted?
Oh, yes, that's quite an important point playing there. Of course, this agreement was entered into between President Zuma and former President Mbeki, and the agreement was that if he is convicted and found guilty in his legal matters relating, of course, to these corruption charges, then he would pay back. So the presidency right now, currently under President Ramaphosa, has said that they will continue to fit the bill, respect the agreement that's in place, unless that agreement is now obviously overturned by this courtroom. But yes, the agreement as it stands is that the case, the state will fit President Zuma's legal bill, unless then he is found guilty, then the president then will have to pay for himself. So, but currently the state continues to pay for his legal fees as it stands, and the presidency has said that it will abide by whatever decision that is given by this very court right behind me.
Sipo, what do we know about today's proceedings? Is it likely to be a lengthy ruling? Is Mr. Zuma likely to be present at court today?
Well, we expect it to be quite short, because it's, there was 2 days of arguments last month in November here by both parties, that is EFF and DA. Of course, the president's lawyers were also here defending him, and obviously arguing against the reviewing of this agreement, saying that the state should continue to pay for President Zuma's legal fees as was agreed. But what we expect today, of course, we expect the leaders of these parties, that is Musi Maimane from DA and also representatives from EFF. I've seen some EFF members just moving around here to come around, of course, also to hear the outcome of this. It would be, of course, a huge political victory or point scoring for these parties if they manage to get this agreement between President Zuma and the presidency overturned. I mean, the DA particularly has been on this spy tape saga for years, for decades. They have not let go. So I think they want to see it right through the end. Of course, now we know that the charges have been reinstated, but now it's the issues of the costs. And the DA is very passionate about this, saying that the president must pay his own legal fees, that South Africans can't continue forking the bill for him. So we expect the DA will have some representations here in court. Of course, EFF asking that the president pay back what's already been paid to him. That figure right now stands around 15 million rands, but then as some sources say that it could be as high as 30 million rands. So we're talking quite a heavy figure here. And if, of course, the ruling goes against the president, then he would have to pay between 15 to 30 million rands of a decade-long of a court litigation bill playing.
Sipo Stearman live for us in Pretoria. Sipo, thank you. Well, former